Alright, let's dive into one of the more obscure but deeply intriguing corners of the Warhammer 40k universe, the idea that some planets have been ruled by immortal oligarchs, their thrones never toppling, their power never truly broken. In a galaxy where entire star systems are consumed by war, where empires rise and fall like the tide, the notion of eternal rulers on worlds that have never known true defeat is a tantalizing one. It's the kind of dark, mythic possibility that keeps the minds of 40k fans churning late into the night, imagining just what kind of beings could hold such unending power. Imagine it, a throne room untouched by the ravages of time, where a figure older than the Imperium itself still rules, their every word law, their every whim a command that shapes the fate of billions. Such a ruler might be more than just a mortal being. Perhaps they have transcended the limitations of flesh, becoming something more akin to a god, a creature of endless cunning and iron will. Or perhaps they have merely learned to bend the cruel laws of the galaxy to their advantage, manipulating technology, genetics, or even darker, more forbidden forces to extend their reign indefinitely. And that's where the real mystery lies. What if some of these rulers are not just ancient, but effectively immortal, outlasting not only their enemies, but even the passage of millennia itself? What if these worlds, seemingly unbreakable and untouched by the tides of chaos, are in fact held together by the will of beings whose strength and ambition have defied the decay of all things? It's a fascinating question, one that hints at the possibility of entire planetary dynasties that have stood for tens of thousands of years, quietly manipulating the fate of the galaxy from the shadows. So what makes this idea so captivating? Perhaps it's the allure of power unending, of secrets hoarded across countless generations, or of the dark, shadowy corridors of power where deals are struck in whispers and blood. Or maybe it's the grim fascination with the cost of such power, the blood spilled, the sacrifices made, the lives extinguished to preserve a single throne. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, nothing is ever truly eternal. Or is it? The origins of these oligarchs stretch back to the earliest days of humanity's expansion into the stars, long before the Imperium of Man took its first halting steps into the void. To understand how such rulers came to be, you have to look at the chaotic, brutal epochs that shaped the galaxy. Before the Emperor unified Terra and launched the Great Crusade, countless human colonies spread like wildfire across the stars during the Dark Age of technology. This was an era defined by rapid advancement, where mankind reached levels of technological mastery that would become little more than legend in the millennia that followed. Many of these colonies, isolated by vast distances and the dangers of deep space, developed unique cultures, technologies, and systems of governance. Some embraced democracy, others fell into anarchic strife, but a few managed to forge stable, long-lasting societies under the rule of powerful individuals or families. These early oligarchs weren't mere planetary governors. They were warlords, technocrats, and visionaries who seized control through cunning, force, or sheer ruthlessness. They built their power on the bones of their rivals, weaving intricate webs of loyalty and fear that allowed them to consolidate control over entire planetary systems. As the age of strife shattered the galaxy, cutting off these isolated worlds from one another, the stronger among them only grew more powerful. Without the oversight of a greater human empire, these rulers were free to reshape their worlds according to their own twisted visions. On some worlds, these oligarchs declared themselves living gods, their every word enshrined as law. On others, they used the remnants of ancient technologies to extend their lives far beyond natural limits, becoming more like living myths than mere mortals. The lines between ruler and deity blurred as generations passed without a single change in leadership. But why would such rulers cling to power for so long, even as their worlds decayed around them? For some, it was the simple, primal hunger for control, a desire to shape reality itself according to their will. Others may have been driven by a darker, more obsessive fear of death, unwilling to surrender their thrones even as the universe itself grew cold and hostile. In the end, the reasons vary as widely as the rulers themselves, but the result is the same: planets frozen in time, ruled by figures whose iron grip has never loosened. Some fans even speculate that these oligarchs might have once served the Emperor himself, perhaps as his chosen proxies during the early days of the Great Crusade. They could have been powerful governors, entrusted with entire sectors of space, who later broke away or went into hiding when the Imperium's grasp weakened. Others whisper that these figures might have even older origins, perhaps dating back to the time when humanity first reached for the stars, driven by dreams of power and conquest. Regardless of their origins, the sheer longevity of their reigns hints at a mastery of both technology and the darker arts, suggesting that these beings have found ways to cheat death itself. It's a chilling thought that somewhere in the darkness of the galaxy, behind layers of fortifications and the shields of entire fleets, there are figures who have never truly known defeat, their power undimmed by the passage of ages. And perhaps even now, they watch the galaxy with cold, unblinking eyes, waiting for their moment to strike. The question of how these oligarchs managed to cling to power for so long, sometimes across millennia, is one of the most fascinating aspects of their legend. After all, even the greatest warriors, the most cunning strategists, and the most ruthless tyrants are eventually worn down by the relentless passage of time. Yet these figures remain, seemingly untouched by the decay that claims lesser rulers. It's as if they've discovered the secret to eternal life, or at least something close to it. But how? What methods do they use to defy the natural order, to outlast empires and survive the countless wars that have consumed entire star systems? For some, the answer lies in technology. During the dark age of technology, humanity achieved feats of bioengineering and cybernetics that would seem like pure heresy to the modern Imperium. Imagine rulers who have replaced their failing organs with devices more efficient and durable than flesh, whose bones have been reinforced with adamantium or wraithbone, whose blood is laced with nanomachines that constantly repair cellular damage. Perhaps they have merged their consciousness with vast neural networks, becoming something more akin to machine than man, a living AI in a shell of flesh and metal. Others might have turned to the darker sciences. The galaxy is full of forbidden knowledge, biotechnological horrors, genetic modifications, and even the twisted gifts of the warp. Some oligarchs could have dabbled in the same genocrafting that once gave birth to the Primarchs themselves, manipulating their own biology to extend their lives far beyond natural limits. They might have grafted the regenerative traits of alien species onto their own DNA, or perhaps they discovered ways to clone themselves, transferring their consciousness into a fresh, unblemished body whenever their old one began to fail. Then there are the rumors of more arcane methods. In the hidden depths of their catacombs, some of these rulers might maintain entire libraries of prescribed texts, ancient tomes bound in human skin, data crypts containing the darkest secrets of long-dead Xeno civilizations, or even fragments of the Emperor's own lost knowledge. They might have struck bargains with the darker powers of the warp, trading their souls for the promise of immortality, or at least a twisted, corrupted form of it. After all, what is a soul but another resource to be exploited, another link in the chain of power? And of course, there are those who believe that these oligarchs have gone even further, transcending the boundaries of mere flesh and becoming something altogether different. Perhaps they have uploaded their minds into vast, self-sustaining data matrices, their consciousnesses spread across entire planetary networks, making them effectively immortal so long as the machinery remains intact. Or perhaps they have found ways to bind their souls to the very bedrock of their worlds, becoming living gods whose will is etched into the fabric of reality itself. But not every method is so grand or so arcane. Some rulers might rely on more mundane, if no less horrifying methods, harvesting the life force of their subjects, drawing strength from the suffering and fear of their people, or consuming the very essence of their foes to extend their own lives. It's a grim thought, but in the 41st millennium, where morality is often little more than a distant memory, such things are far from impossible. Of course, Not all fans agree on which of these theories is the most likely. Some argue that these rulers are simply exceptionally long-lived humans, perhaps the products of early genetic enhancement programs or descendants of those who once walked among the stars as god kings. Others believe that they have been twisted by the powers they once sought to control, becoming little more than puppets of the dark forces they tried to bend to their will. And then there are those who suggest that these oligarchs have long since passed into the realm of legend, their true nature lost to the shadows of history, their real faces hidden behind 1,000 layers of myth and propaganda. Whatever the truth, the very existence of these immortal rulers is a testament to the brutal, unending struggle for power that defines the galaxy. It's a reminder that even in the far future, where gods walk among men and entire worlds can be obliterated with a single command, some beings have found a way to cheat death itself. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying power of all. When you think about the galaxy of Warhammer 40K, it's hard not to picture a place of constant war and unending chaos. Entire star systems fall to the predations of alien invaders, demonic incursions, and the ceaseless grind of imperial campaigns. Yet, amidst all this turmoil, there are worlds that stand as anomalies, planets that have never truly fallen, that have resisted the countless tides of invasion and destruction that have reshaped the galaxy time and time again. These worlds, often ruled by the same immortal oligarchs we've been talking about, are as mysterious as they are enduring. One of the first things that stands out about these planets is their isolation. Many of them are cut off from the main arteries of the Imperium, hidden in the dark, forgotten corners of the galaxy where even the most determined inquisitors hesitate to tread. This isolation can be a double-edged sword, of course. It keeps them safe from the immediate scrutiny of the Imperium, but it also means they have to rely on their own resources to survive. In many cases, these worlds have become self-sufficient, developing economies and technologies that allow them to weather the storms that would shatter lesser civilizations. But isolation alone doesn't explain their endurance. After all, many worlds have tried to stand apart from the Imperium, only to be crushed by the relentless advance of the Emperor's armies or swept away by the tides of chaos. So what makes these planets different? Some fans speculate that these worlds have access to ancient technologies, relics of the Dark Age of technology, that allow them to resist invasion and corruption in ways that the Imperium simply can't comprehend. Maybe they have entire fleets of warships hidden in their asteroid belts, automated defense grids that have never been breached, or planetary shields powered by long-lost technologies that even the tech priests of Mars can only dream of. Others point to the possibility of genetic engineering. If these worlds are ruled by immortal oligarchs, it's possible that their populations have been modified over the millennia to be stronger, more resilient, and less susceptible to the horrors of the warp. Perhaps they've bred entire generations of warriors who are immune to the whispers of chaos, whose minds are as unyielding as their armored bastions. It's a chilling thought that entire planetary populations might be little more than the genetic experiments of their immortal rulers, shaped over countless generations to serve as the perfect soldiers, workers, or even living sacrifices. And then there's the idea that these worlds are protected not just by technology, but by something far darker. What if these oligarchs have struck bargains with the dark gods of the warp themselves, trading the souls of their subjects for protection from the madness of chaos? It wouldn't be the first time a ruler has sold their people's freedom for power, and in the grim darkness of the far future, such deals might be the only thing keeping a world from falling into oblivion. But perhaps the most compelling theory is that these planets never truly fell because they never truly played the game. Instead of aligning themselves with the Imperium or the forces of chaos, they chose a different path, one of isolation and self-reliance. They built their power not on alliances or pacts, but on the cold, ruthless calculation of their rulers, who understood that to survive in the galaxy of the 41st millennium, you have to be willing to make sacrifices that others would find unthinkable. These are worlds where loyalty is measured in blood and iron, where the weak are culled without mercy, and the strong rise to ever greater heights of power. Of course, this kind of cold pragmatism comes at a cost. The people of these worlds live under the iron grip of their oligarchs, their lives shaped by the whims of beings who have long since abandoned the concept of mercy. But in a galaxy where the only constant is war, perhaps that's the only way to survive. Because in the end, those who cling to outdated notions of honor or compassion rarely last long in the 41st millennium. And perhaps that's why these worlds, though isolated, ruthless, and often brutal, have never truly fallen. The political power these oligarchs wield is perhaps their greatest weapon, and it's as much a product of cunning manipulation as it is of brute force. After all, ruling a planet for centuries or even millennia isn't just about military might or technological advantage. It's about controlling the hearts and minds of your subjects, about making them believe that you are not just their ruler, but their rightful master, the very embodiment of their world's will. This is a kind of power that goes far beyond simple dictatorship. It's a form of control that seeps into every aspect of life, shaping the culture, the economy, and even the very beliefs of those who live under their rule. One of the first tricks these oligarchs use is to create a tightly woven web of loyalty and fear. They surround themselves with layers of loyal lieutenants, bureaucrats, and enforcers, each with a personal stake in maintaining the status quo. These inner circles are often bound not just by oaths, but by blood and shared secrets, making betrayal all but impossible. After all, how can you turn against a ruler who holds your family's lives in their hands, or who knows every dark secret you've ever tried to hide? This kind of control extends all the way down the social ladder, from the lowest workers to the mightiest warlords, creating a society where every man, woman, and child knows that their fate is tied to the whims of their ruler. Economically, these oligarchs often control not just the production and distribution of goods, but the very flow of wealth itself. They use their immense resources to build grand monuments, towering spires, and vast factories that serve as constant reminders of their power. In some cases, they even control entire planetary economies, setting prices, manipulating trade routes, and hoarding precious resources to ensure their continued dominance. It's a kind of economic warfare that leaves their rivals struggling to survive, slowly bleeding them dry until they have no choice but to submit. Culturally, these rulers understand the power of symbolism and myth. They create elaborate rituals, grand public ceremonies, and carefully crafted propaganda to reinforce their divine status. On some worlds, the oligarchs are worshipped as living gods, their every word treated as sacred law. They might commission vast works of art, epic poems, or even entire musical symphonies that glorify their rule, creating a sense of awe and reverence that makes rebellion seem unthinkable. It's a tactic as old as humanity itself. Make your people love you, fear you, and believe that their very survival depends on your continued rule, and they will follow you into the depths of hell itself. But perhaps the most insidious form of control is religious. Some oligarchs have created entire cults around themselves, twisting ancient myths and half-forgotten legends into new, self-serving doctrines that place them at the center of their subjects' spiritual lives. These cults often serve a dual purpose, acting as both a source of spiritual guidance and a brutally efficient secret police force, rooting out dissent and punishing those who dare to question their divine authority. In this way, faith itself becomes a weapon, a means of control more powerful than any gun or blade. Of course, not every ruler chooses the path of divine kingship. Some prefer to rule from the shadows, manipulating their subjects through fear, lies, and the careful management of information. They spread rumors, fuel paranoia, and create an atmosphere of constant uncertainty, making it impossible for any would-be rebels to organize against them. In this way, they keep their populations divided, suspicious, and too afraid to act against their masters. And yet, despite the brutality of these methods, there are always those who whisper of rebellion, who dream of a world without their immortal overlords. But the oligarchs know this too, and they crush such whispers with a ruthlessness born of centuries of experience. For them, power isn't just a means to an end. It's a way of life, a path they have walked for so long that they have become masters of the art of control. And as long as they can keep their worlds in line, as long as they can continue to manipulate the hearts and minds of their subjects, their thrones will remain unchallenged, their rule unbroken. Every ruler needs more than just power to hold their throne for centuries. They need a legend, a myth that elevates them above the masses, that makes them seem less like mere mortals and more like demigods. These oligarchs have perfected this art, weaving intricate stories around themselves that blur the line between reality and myth, creating personas that inspire both fear and reverence in equal measure. It's a form of psychological warfare, a way of bending the minds of their subjects to their will without ever raising a blade. Some of the most powerful myths surrounding these rulers are those that speak of their supposed immortality. They are often portrayed as ageless beings, untouched by the passage of time, their faces as unchanging as the cold, unfeeling stars. On some worlds, the common folk believe that their rulers have walked among them for thousands of years, shaping the destiny of their planets through sheer force of will. These myths often paint them as almost godlike figures, beings of such power and cunning that even the forces of chaos dare not challenge their rule. In some cases, these legends go even further, suggesting that the rulers are not merely immortal, but truly divine, beings who have ascended beyond the limitations of flesh and bone to become something greater. They are said to command the elements, to bend the very laws of physics to their will, to see the future as clearly as they see the present. Some even claim that they can walk through the warp without fear, that the dark whispers of the immaterium fall silent in their presence, too terrified to touch their immortal souls. Of course, this kind of myth-making isn't just about raw power. It's also about creating a sense of inevitability, a feeling that resistance is not just futile, but blasphemous. After all, how can you hope to overthrow a being who is not just a ruler, but a god? How can you rise up against a figure who has supposedly lived through 10,000 years of unending war, who has seen entire civilizations rise and fall, who has crushed 1,000 rebellions beneath their iron-shod heel? But it's not just their supposed immortality that feeds these myths. Many of these rulers surround themselves with symbols of their power, carefully curated images that reinforce their divine status. Their thrones might be carved from the bones of their enemies, their crowns studded with the blackened skulls of defeated warlords. Their palaces are often built on the ruins of ancient temples, their banners decorated with the flayed skins of those who dared to defy them. These are not just signs of their power, they are reminders that these rulers have outlasted countless foes, that they have survived wars that would have broken lesser men. Some rulers even go so far as to create entire religions around themselves, rewriting history to place themselves at the center of their people's faith. They commission grand murals and towering statues that depict their deeds in glorious, often exaggerated detail, casting themselves as the saviors of their worlds, the chosen of the gods, the rightful masters of all they survey. In these myths, their enemies are often reduced to little more than mindless beasts or faceless demons, their victories painted as inevitable, their defeats conveniently forgotten or rewritten as heroic last stands. And of course, there are always the darker, more sinister myths, the whispered rumors that these rulers have made pacts with ancient forbidden powers, that their immortality comes not from technology or sheer force of will, but from darker, more terrifying sources. Perhaps they have bargained with the chaos gods themselves, trading the souls of their subjects for eternal life. Or maybe they have discovered ancient, forbidden technologies that allow them to cheat death, to rebuild their bodies from the bones of their enemies, or to transfer their minds into fresh, unblemished clones. Whatever the truth, these myths serve a purpose. They make these rulers seem untouchable, unkillable, more than just men. They turn them into living legends, figures of awe and terror, whose very names inspire both devotion and dread. And as long as their subjects believe these myths, as long as they fear the wrath of their immortal masters, these rulers will remain unchallenged, their thrones unbroken. The question of how these oligarchs achieve their seemingly endless lifespans is one of the most tantalizing mysteries surrounding them. In a galaxy where death is a constant companion, where entire civilizations rise and fall in the span of a few centuries, the idea of a ruler who has outlasted countless empires is as terrifying as it is fascinating. After all, what kind of being could survive for thousands of years without succumbing to the decay that claims all living things? What secrets have they uncovered that allow them to cheat death itself? One of the most common theories is that these oligarchs have mastered the ancient arts of biological manipulation. During the dark age of technology, humanity achieved levels of genetic engineering that would seem like pure heresy to the modern Imperium. It's possible that some of these rulers were created in the labs of that long-dead era, their bodies enhanced with traits designed to resist the ravages of time. Perhaps they possess regenerative abilities that allow them to heal from even the most grievous wounds, their cells constantly renewing themselves in a way that defies modern science. Or maybe their bodies have been modified to replace failing organs with synthetic substitutes, creating a form of living machine that can endure for centuries without weakening. Others suggest that these oligarchs have found ways to transfer their consciousness from one body to another, effectively making them immortal as long as they have fresh vessels to inhabit. This might involve complex neural transfers, perhaps using technologies stolen from the Mechanicum or even reverse-engineered from ancient Xenos artifacts. Imagine a ruler who can simply abandon a dying body, uploading their mind into a clone or a cybernetic shell, free from the weaknesses of flesh. It's a chilling thought, but in a galaxy where the line between man and machine has long since blurred, it's far from impossible. Then there are the darker, more unsettling possibilities. What if some of these rulers have found ways to bind their souls to the physical world, creating a form of necromantic immortality that defies even the most basic laws of nature? Perhaps they have discovered ways to draw life energy from their subjects, feeding off the fear, pain, or even the very souls of those who serve them. This kind of parasitic existence would be as horrifying as it is effective, allowing them to remain eternally young while those around them wither and die. And, of course, there's always the possibility that some of these oligarchs have made bargains with the dark powers of the warp. After all, if the Chaos Gods can offer their followers power, strength, and even godhood in exchange for their souls, why not immortality as well? Perhaps these rulers have traded their humanity for eternal life, becoming something more akin to demons than men, their bodies mere vessels for the twisted will of their dark masters. But not every method of achieving immortality is so extreme. Some of these rulers might rely on more subtle, if no less terrifying, means to extend their lives. Perhaps they have mastered the art of stasis, freezing themselves in time for decades or even centuries, emerging only when their worlds are threatened or when their rivals grow too bold. Or maybe they have learned to manipulate the flow of time itself, using arcane technologies to slow their own aging or even to reverse the effects of time entirely. There are even those who believe that some of these oligarchs have found ways to achieve true, physical immortality, becoming something more akin to the Necrons than to mere men. Perhaps they have replaced their flesh with living metal, their minds stored in vast crystalline data cores, their bodies little more than shells for the consciousness within. This would make them effectively unkillable, able to rebuild themselves from even the smallest fragment of their shattered forms. Of course, not every fan agrees on which of these theories is the most likely. Some argue that these rulers are simply exceptionally long-lived humans, perhaps the products of early genetic enhancement programs or descendants of those who once walked among the stars as god kings. Others believe that they have been twisted by the powers they once sought to control, becoming little more than puppets of the dark forces they tried to bend to their will. And then there are those who suggest that these oligarchs have long since passed into the realm of legend, their true nature lost to the shadows of history, their real faces hidden behind 1,000 layers of myth and propaganda. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain: These rulers have found a way to defy the one constant of the universe, to stare into the abyss of eternity and refuse to blink. And that, perhaps, is the greatest secret of all. Of course, not every tale of these immortal oligarchs can be taken at face value. In a galaxy as vast and chaotic as that of Warhammer 40K, stories have a way of growing larger with each retelling, small truths becoming grand legends and half-forgotten whispers turning into unquestioned dogma. It's entirely possible that much of what we believe about these rulers is little more than myth, carefully crafted to keep their subjects in line and their enemies at bay. After all, what better way to maintain power than to convince your subjects that you are untouchable, that you have transcended the limitations of mere mortals? If your people believe that you cannot die, that you have ruled for millennia without ever truly aging, they are far less likely to rise against you. They become willing to accept even the harshest of rule, believing that their suffering is part of some grand, eternal plan, that their ruler is a being of divine power whose will must never be questioned. It's a tactic as old as tyranny itself. Even in our own history, countless emperors, kings, and warlords have wrapped themselves in the trappings of divinity, presenting themselves as gods in human form or as the chosen instruments of fate. Why would the oligarchs of the 41st millennium be any different? Perhaps their supposed immortality is little more than a carefully cultivated illusion, a mask they wear to hide their all-too-human fears of death and decay. Some fans have even suggested that these rulers might not be individuals at all, but entire dynasties masquerading as single beings. Imagine a ruling family that takes on the same name, the same title, and even the same physical appearance across generations, creating the illusion of a single, unchanging ruler who has guided their world for centuries. It's a clever trick, one that would explain the seemingly endless lifespans of some of these oligarchs without resorting to supernatural or technological explanations. After all, what is 1,000 years to a family that has perfected the art of deception? Others take a darker view, arguing that these rulers might not even be alive in the conventional sense. Perhaps they are little more than hollow shells, their minds long since lost to madness or corruption, their bodies animated by ancient technologies or bound to the will of their successors through arcane rituals. Or maybe they are little more than elaborate puppets, their every move controlled by the shadowy cabals that truly hold power behind the scenes, their immortal thrones little more than stage props in a grand galactic deception. And then there are those who believe that these rulers are indeed immortal, but not in the way that their legends would have us believe. Perhaps they have merely found ways to extend their lives far beyond natural limits, using genetic engineering, cybernetic enhancements, or even forbidden Xenos technologies to cheat death for centuries or even millennia. In this view, their immortality is not a matter of divine right, but a hard-won prize, bought with blood and sacrifice and the endless grinding struggle for survival. But even if some of these rulers truly are immortal, that doesn't necessarily make them gods. After all, immortality comes at a cost, and it's possible that these beings have paid a price so terrible that they can no longer truly be considered human. Perhaps they have sacrificed their very souls in their pursuit of eternal life, becoming little more than hollow, soulless beings, clinging to their thrones out of fear rather than true power. Of course, none of this means that the legends of these oligarchs are entirely false. In a galaxy as vast and ancient as that of Warhammer 40K, where even the most outlandish tales often hold a grain of truth, it's entirely possible that some of these rulers truly have achieved a form of immortality. But even if that's the case, it's unlikely that their power is as absolute as their legends would have us believe. After all, even the greatest empires can crumble, and even the most powerful beings can fall. In the end, perhaps the greatest trick these rulers have ever pulled is not simply surviving for millennia, but convincing the galaxy that they are something more than human, that they are beyond the reach of death itself. And as long as their subjects continue to believe that lie, their thrones will remain unchallenged, their power unbroken. Of course, no ruler, no matter how ancient or powerful, can survive in complete isolation. Even the most fortified worlds must eventually interact with the wider galaxy, and for these oligarchs, that means dealing with the countless, often brutal factions that dominate the Warhammer 40K universe. It's a dangerous game, one where a single misstep can spell doom for even the most unassailable dynasty. Yet somehow, these rulers have managed to walk this treacherous path for centuries, even millennia, maintaining their grip on power despite the constant threats that surround them. The Imperium, in particular, has always been a thorn in their side. For all its flaws, the Imperium is a jealous master, one that tolerates no rivals and demands absolute loyalty from its subjects. Any world that dares to claim true independence, that refuses to bend the knee to the Emperor's will, is a target for retribution. And yet, some of these oligarchs have managed to keep their thrones intact, either by hiding their true nature from the watchful eyes of the Inquisition, or by striking carefully calculated bargains with the Adeptus Terra. Perhaps they pay their tithes in rare resources, ancient technologies, or the blood of their own subjects, offering just enough to keep the Imperial war machine satisfied while quietly consolidating their own power behind the scenes. But it's not just the Imperium they have to worry about. The forces of chaos are an ever-present threat, their dark whispers reaching even into the deepest, most fortified bastions of the galaxy. Some fans speculate that these rulers have managed to resist the temptations of chaos not through sheer willpower, but by making their own dark pacts with the powers of the warp, trading their souls for the promise of eternal life or invulnerability. Others believe that they have developed technologies or psychic defenses that make them immune to the corrupting influence of the Immaterium, surrounding themselves with wards, runes, and psi-reactive barriers that block the whispers of the dark gods. Of course, this kind of defiance comes at a cost. The forces of chaos are not known for their mercy, and any ruler who dares to stand against them must be prepared to face not just armies of traitor marines and warp-spawned horrors, but the full, unrelenting fury of the gods themselves. Perhaps this is why so many of these worlds have become fortresses, their skies darkened by orbital defense platforms, their mountains hollowed out to create vast armored citadels that can withstand even the most brutal of sieges. For these oligarchs, survival means never letting their guard down, never allowing even the smallest crack to appear in their defenses, for fear that it might invite the attention of the dark powers that lurk beyond the veil. And then there are the Xenos, those alien races that see humanity as little more than prey or, at best, a potential ally in their own struggles for survival. The Necrons, for example, would have little tolerance for worlds ruled by mere mortals, viewing them as little more than insects to be crushed beneath their metal feet. The Tyranids, too, would show no mercy, their endless hunger consuming entire star systems without a second thought. Even the more civilized Xenos, like the Tau or the Eldar, would have little reason to respect the claims of these oligarchs, viewing them as relics of a primitive, backward species clinging to power in a galaxy that has long since passed them by. And yet, somehow, these rulers endure. Perhaps they have struck alliances with the more pragmatic Xenos factions, offering their worlds as staging grounds for campaigns against the Imperium or other common foes. Or perhaps they have simply managed to remain hidden, their planets shrouded in the darkness of the void, their true power concealed behind layers of misdirection and deception. Whatever the case, it's clear that these oligarchs have learned to navigate the complex, often contradictory politics of the galaxy with a skill that even the most cunning rogue traders would envy. They know when to strike and when to retreat, when to make alliances and when to sever them, when to present themselves as powerful warlords and when to melt back into the shadows, becoming little more than whispered legends on the lips of those who pass through their space. It's a dangerous, ever-shifting game, one where the stakes are nothing less than survival itself. But as long as these rulers can stay one step ahead of their enemies, as long as they can continue to manipulate the great powers of the galaxy to their advantage, they will remain on their thrones, their rule unbroken, their power unchallenged, Of course, when it comes to the mysterious rulers of these forgotten worlds, fan speculation is bound to run wild. The Warhammer 40k community has never been shy about filling in the gaps left by the official lore, and these oligarchs are no exception. For every fragment of ancient history or cryptic reference in a codex, there are a dozen fan theories, each one more imaginative and unsettling than the last. One of the more popular theories is that these oligarchs might be remnants of humanity's earliest attempts at genetic engineering. During the dark age of technology, humanity reached levels of scientific mastery that would seem like pure witchcraft to the modern Imperium. It's possible that these rulers are the products of those early experiments, living weapons or engineered demigods designed to survive in the harshest of environments. Perhaps their bodies were designed to regenerate damaged tissue, their bones reinforced with advanced composites, their minds enhanced to process information at superhuman speeds. Over the millennia, these enhancements might have become so deeply integrated into their biology that they now exist in a state of near-permanent regeneration, effectively making them immortal. Others take a more mystical approach, suggesting that these rulers might have discovered ways to draw power from the warp itself without falling to the temptations of chaos. After all, the warp is a place of infinite possibility, a realm where the normal laws of physics and biology are little more than suggestions. If these rulers have learned to harness even a fraction of that power, perhaps by binding their souls to their worlds or drawing on the psychic energy of their subjects, they might have become something more than human, living gods whose power defies even the passage of time. Then there's the theory that these oligarchs might actually be artificial intelligences, remnants of the Men of Iron or other lost technologies from humanity's distant past. In this version of events, these rulers are not flesh and blood at all, but vast, calculating minds housed in ancient, immortal bodies of metal and circuitry. They might have started as mere servants, designed to guide humanity through the long dark of interstellar travel, but over the millennia, they evolved, becoming the cold, calculating tyrants we know today. This would explain their seemingly inhuman ability to predict and counter the moves of their enemies, as well as their apparent immunity to the corrupting influence of the warp. Of course, not all fan theories are quite so grand. Some suggest that these oligarchs might simply be exceptionally long-lived humans, perhaps the descendants of the Emperor's early experiments in genetic modification or the survivors of long-lost pre-imperial colonies. These rulers might be no different from the billions of other humans scattered across the galaxy, except for the fact that they have found ways to extend their lives through careful breeding, advanced medical technologies, or perhaps even the consumption of the life essence of their subjects. And then there are the truly outlandish theories, the ones that sound more like the fevered ravings of a madman than serious speculation. Some fans have suggested that these oligarchs might not be human at all, but something far stranger, perhaps even the last remnants of a long-extinct Xenos race that has learned to disguise itself as human in order to survive. Or perhaps they are the twisted, corrupted remnants of long-dead gods, their divine essence trapped in decaying bodies of flesh and metal, driven mad by the endless passage of time. But perhaps the most compelling theory of all is that these rulers are not truly immortal, but merely masters of deception. Perhaps they have learned to hide their true nature behind layers of myth and propaganda, creating the illusion of eternal life, while their true selves rot away in hidden tombs or stasis chambers, their minds preserved in artificial constructs or downloaded into the minds of their successors. In this version of the story, the oligarchs are little more than ghosts, hollow echoes of a long-dead past, clinging to power through fear, manipulation, and the careful control of information. Of course, the truth is probably a mix of all these theories, with each ruler finding their own path to immortality, each one carving out their own place in the darkness of the galaxy. And perhaps that's what makes these oligarchs so fascinating, not just their power, but the sheer mind-bending variety of ways in which they have managed to cheat death and outlast entire civilizations. In a galaxy where even the mightiest warlords and demigods eventually fall, the fact that these rulers have survived for so long is a mystery that will continue to haunt the darkest corners of the 41st millennium. For all their power and seemingly eternal reigns, even the mightiest of these oligarchs are not truly invincible. Like all tyrants, their rule depends on a delicate balance of fear, loyalty, and sheer force. And if that balance is ever broken, their thrones can crumble as easily as any other. But what would it take to bring down a being who has ruled for centuries, even millennia, without ever truly tasting defeat? One of the most obvious paths to their downfall is simple rebellion. Even the most carefully cultivated myth of immortality can only go so far in suppressing the natural human desire for freedom. Over time, the cracks in their seemingly unbreakable control might start to show as their subjects grow weary of endless servitude and begin to question the divine right of their rulers. If a charismatic leader were to arise, someone capable of uniting the disparate factions of a world under a single banner of revolt, it's possible that even the most powerful oligarch could be brought down by sheer force of numbers. Of course, such a rebellion would need more than just raw numbers to succeed. It would also require a profound shift in the cultural and psychological landscape of the world, a breaking of the deeply ingrained myths that keep these rulers in power. This might involve exposing the truth behind their supposed immortality, revealing them as mere mortals who have used technology, deception, and dark magic to cheat death rather than true demigods. Once their subjects realize that their rulers are not the all-powerful beings they claim to be, the psychological hold they have over their worlds could shatter in an instant. Then there's the possibility of outside intervention. The Imperium, for all its flaws, has a long history of breaking the power of tyrants and bringing entire star systems back into the fold. A full-scale Imperial crusade, backed by the might of the Adeptus Astartes, the Astra Militarum, and the fleets of the Imperial Navy, would be more than enough to crush even the most fortified of these worlds. Of course, such a campaign would come at a tremendous cost in lives and resources, but the Imperium has never been known to shy away from such sacrifices in the name of the Emperor. But perhaps the greatest threat to these oligarchs comes not from their own subjects or the forces of the Imperium, but from the dark powers of the warp. For all their cunning and ruthlessness, even the most powerful rulers are still vulnerable to the whispers of the Chaos Gods, to the subtle, insidious corruption that seeps into the hearts of all who grasp for power. Perhaps some of these oligarchs have already made dark pacts with the ruinous powers, trading their souls for immortality and power, only to find themselves ensnared in the twisted, ever-shifting webs of the immaterium. In such a case, their downfall might be less a matter of open rebellion and more a slow, inexorable slide into madness and damnation. Then there are the Xenos, those alien races that have little interest in the internal politics of humanity, but pose an existential threat to any world they choose to invade. A Tyranid hive fleet, for example, would sweep away even the most fortified oligarchy with terrifying efficiency, reducing entire worlds to barren, lifeless husks in a matter of weeks. The Necrons, too, would have little patience for the petty rule of mortal tyrants, viewing them as little more than vermin to be exterminated. Even the Eldar, with their strange, unknowable motives, might decide that a particular oligarch has become too great a threat to be allowed to survive, launching a surgical strike to eliminate them before they can further disrupt the delicate balance of the galaxy. Of course, not all potential threats to these rulers come from without. Some might fall to internal power struggles, their carefully constructed networks of loyalty and fear collapsing under the weight of their own ambitions. After all, even the most ruthless tyrant cannot rule alone, and the more powerful their inner circle becomes, the greater the risk that one of their closest allies will decide that they would make a better ruler. In a society where betrayal is a way of life, where loyalty is little more than a convenient fiction, it's only a matter of time before someone sharpens their blade and makes a move for the throne. And then there's the simple, brutal truth that even the mightiest beings can still fall to the blade, the bullet or the bolt round. A single lucky shot, a perfectly timed assassination, or even a betrayal from within their own household could bring down even the most seemingly invincible ruler. After all, no matter how many centuries they have ruled, no matter how many armies they command, these oligarchs are still, at their core, only mortal. In the end, the fall of one of these rulers would be a moment of both great tragedy and dark triumph, a reminder that even in the grim darkness of the far future, no throne is truly unbreakable, no power truly eternal. And perhaps that, more than anything, is what makes these figures so compelling, not just their immense power, but the ever-present whispered possibility that even they might one day fall. In the end, the oligarchs of the Warhammer 40K universe remain one of its most intriguing mysteries. They are beings who have defied the passage of time, outlasted empires, and built thrones that have endured for centuries, even millennia. They are both kings and tyrants, gods and devils, their names whispered in fear and awe across countless worlds. And yet, for all their power, they are still creatures of flesh and blood, bound by the same fears and desires that have driven humanity for tens of thousands of years. Perhaps that's what makes them so compelling. They are not the all-powerful, immortal demigods they present themselves as, but deeply flawed beings, clinging to their power with a desperation born of centuries of struggle. They have traded their humanity for the promise of eternal life, sacrificed their souls on the altar of ambition, and surrounded themselves with walls of steel and lies to protect themselves from the countless enemies that would see them fall. They are both tragic and terrifying, figures who have become more myth than man, more legend than flesh. And yet, for all their power, they are not invincible. They can be brought down, their thrones shattered, their legacies erased. It might take a rebellion, an imperial crusade, or the wrath of the dark gods themselves, but even the mightiest tyrants can fall. Perhaps that is the ultimate truth of the 41st millennium, that no matter how powerful a ruler becomes, no matter how deeply they entrench themselves in the fabric of their worlds, they are still, in the end, mortal. So if you've ever wondered what it would take to topple one of these ancient, unbreakable thrones, to shatter the illusions of eternal power and expose the fragile, fearful creatures that sit upon them, then you're in the right place. This is the dark heart of Warhammer 40K, a place where gods can die, empires can crumble, and even the most ancient of rulers can fall. If you've enjoyed this journey into the shadows of the Imperium, the mysteries of the Warp, and the forgotten corners of the galaxy, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We'll be diving even deeper into the hidden histories, the unspoken horrors, and the untold stories of Warhammer 40K, exploring the darkest, most obscure corners of the galaxy that even the Emperor himself might fear to tread. Thanks for watching, and remember, no throne is truly eternal.